The fluorescent lights of Research Station Horizon flickered as the massive containment pod arrived through the quantum delivery system. Marcus Reed stood with his arms crossed, watching as the security team scrambled to secure the area. The pod's surface was covered in warning signs in 12 different alien languages. Only one message was written in English: "Extreme danger, apex predator." "Dr. Reed," the station's AI announced through the overhead speakers, "Director Thompson requests your immediate presence in the observation room." Marcus adjusted his lab coat and walked through the sterilization chamber. His heart raced with excitement. After 15 years of studying alien life forms, this was his first encounter with a Class 10 dangerous species. The observation room's doors slid open with a soft hiss. Director Thompson, a tall woman with graying hair, stood before the reinforced viewing window. "Marcus, I need your expertise on this one," she said without turning around. "We've lost 3 researchers already." Marcus stepped closer to the window. In the chamber below, the containment pod's outer shell was being carefully removed by robotic arms. "What exactly are we dealing with?" he asked. "The locals call it the Shadow Beast. It's killed researchers from 3 different species, including 2 from races we considered apex predators themselves." Thompson handed him a tablet. "It shows signs of high intelligence, but extreme aggression makes study impossible." The tablet displayed footage from previous attempts to study the creature. Marcus watched as a massive dark form moved with impossible speed, its body seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. The footage ended with static. "Why bring it here?" Marcus asked, still studying the data scrolling across his screen. "Because we're the best," Thompson replied simply. "And because you have a gift for understanding the supposedly untamable." She finally turned to face him. "I need you to leave this project." Before Marcus could respond, alarms blared through the station. Below, the inner containment pod had been opened. The creature inside was larger than the specifications had suggested. Its body was covered in what looked like shifting shadows, making it hard to focus on its true form. Marcus could make out multiple limbs, each ending in what appeared to be both claws and fine manipulators. The creature moved to the edge of its reinforced enclosure, pressing against the transparent barrier. Its movements were smooth, calculated. This wasn't the mindless aggression Marcus had expected. There was purpose in every motion. "The previous teams made a mistake," Marcus said, stepping closer to the window. "They treated it like an animal." Thompson raised an eyebrow. "It killed 12 people, Marcus. What would you call it?" "Scared." Marcus pointed to the creature's behavior pattern. "Look at how it's testing the enclosure. It's not looking for weak points to escape. It's mapping its environment. That's not predatory behavior. That's intelligence." The station's AI interrupted. "Dr. Reed is correct. New analysis shows the subject's brain activity patterns are consistent with problem-solving rather than hunting behavior." Marcus turned to Thompson. "I'll take the project, but I have conditions. First, we stop treating it like a mindless killer. Second, I want full access to the data from previous attempts to study it. And third," he paused, making sure he had her full attention, "we improve its living conditions immediately." Thompson frowned. "The containment protocols are based on fear, not science," Marcus finished. "If we want different results, we need a different approach." Below, the creature had stopped moving. Its form seemed to solidify slightly, revealing what might have been eyes. Dozens of them, all focused on the observation window. On Marcus. "Very well," Thompson said after a long moment. "But be careful, Marcus. The last researcher who tried to be kind to it." She trailed off. "Treated it with pity, not respect," Marcus replied. "There's a difference." As Marcus left the observation room, he could still feel the creature's gaze following him. Tomorrow, he would begin his work. Tonight, he had research to do. Somewhere in the failed attempts of his predecessors, there had to be clues about what this being really was, and why it had reacted with such violence to previous contact. The station's lights dimmed as night cycle began, but in the containment chamber below, dozens of eyes continued to watch and wait. Marcus spent 3 days watching the shadow beast through the observation window. He noticed things the previous researchers had missed. The creature wasn't pacing, it was dancing. Each movement followed a precise pattern, repeating every 6 hours. Its many eyes didn't just track movement, they blinked in sequence, like binary code. "Computer," Marcus called out while making notes, "what's the temperature in the containment chamber?" "Current temperature is maintained at station standard, 20 degrees Celsius." Marcus frowned. "And what's the temperature on its home world?" "Average temperature on planet DN 2187 is 12 degrees Celsius during active periods." Active periods. Marcus looked up from his notes. The planet experiences extreme temperature variations. The species is most active during twilight hours when temperatures are lowest. Marcus stood up quickly. "We've been keeping it in conditions that would make a human uncomfortable with constant bright light. No wonder it's agitated." He pressed the comm button. "Director Thompson, I need authorization to modify the containment environment." There was a long pause before Thompson's voice came through. "Request denied. We maintain standard conditions for safety reasons." "With all due respect," Marcus argued, "we're essentially keeping it in a sauna with the lights always on. That's not safety, it's torture." Another pause. "You have 1 hour. If anything goes wrong, you'll be removed from the project." Marcus worked quickly. He adjusted the chamber's environmental controls, lowering the temperature and dimming the lights to match the creature's natural habitat. As the changes took effect, the shadow beast's movements became smoother, more deliberate. Then Marcus did something that made the observing security team gasp. He entered the antechamber to the containment area. "Dr. Reed," the station's eye warned, "direct contact is not advised." "I'm not making contact," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady. "I'm just delivering a gift." He placed a container in the transfer chamber. Inside were plants from the creature's home world. Simple moss and fungi that glowed with a soft blue light. The shadow beast watched as the transfer chamber cycled. When the plants appeared in its enclosure, it didn't immediately approach them. Instead, it turned all of its eyes toward Marcus and went completely still. Marcus held his ground. "I know you can understand me," he said clearly. "These are from your world. They're not much, but they're a start." The creature's form shifted, shadows flowing like liquid. Then, with movements so gentle they seemed impossible for its size, it began to arrange the plants in a pattern Marcus recognized from his research. The same pattern used in religious ceremonies on its home world. "Incredible," Marcus whispered. "You're not just intelligent, you're cultured." The shadow beast finished its arrangement, and then did something unprecedented. It dimmed its own light-absorbing field, becoming slightly more visible. Its true form was still hard to comprehend, but the gesture was clear, a show of trust. Marcus spent the next few hours documenting everything. The creature's movements had changed completely. Instead of testing its enclosure, it was now creating complex geometric patterns with the glowing plants. Each pattern seemed to tell a story. "Dr. Reed," the AI interrupted his observations. "Director Thompson is requesting your preliminary report." Marcus smiled, not taking his eyes off the creature. "Tell her the shadow beast isn't a prisoner anymore. It's our first student exchange." The creature paused in its work, turning several eyes toward Marcus. Then it did something that made Marcus's heart skip. It mimicked his smile, creating a curve in its shadowy form that perfectly matched his expression. And Marcus added softly, "I think I just became its first teacher." That night, as the station's crew slept, security cameras recorded something remarkable. The shadow beast was recreating human letters using the glowing plants. Over and over, it spelled out a single word: more. In his quarters, Marcus was already planning tomorrow's lessons. He had been right. The key wasn't controlling the creature, but understanding it. And somewhere in the space between fear and fascination, he had found something unprecedented. A chance to bridge the gap between two very different kinds of intelligence. 2 weeks had passed since the first breakthrough, and Marcus stood before a room full of skeptical scientists. The display screen behind him showed live footage of the shadow beast's enclosure, where glowing plants now formed complex patterns across the walls and floor. As you can see, Marcus explained, pointing to the patterns, what we mistook for aggressive behavior was actually frustration. The species communicates through movement and light patterns. We were literally keeping it in the dark. Director Thompson leaned forward. That doesn't explain the deaths, Dr. Reed. Marcus took a deep breath. Actually, it does. He switched to a different video. Watch this footage from the first facility. See how the researchers are wearing bright white suits, making sudden movements. In their culture, that's equivalent to screaming threats. The room fell silent as they watched the old footage with new understanding. The shadow beast's violent reactions now looked less like attacks and more like desperate self-defense. Back in the containment area, Marcus began his daily session. He had developed a simple sign language, combining human gestures with the creature's natural light pattern communication. The shadow beast had learned it surprisingly quickly. Can you tell me about your people? Marcus signed, his hands moving in the dim blue light. The creature's form rippled, and its shadows began forming shapes in the air. Through their new shared language, it revealed an astonishing truth. Its species called themselves the Night Hunters, but not because they were predators. They were seekers of knowledge who worked best in darkness, where their ability to manipulate light and shadow let them study the universe in ways other species couldn't imagine. Why are you here? Marcus asked. On this station. The Night Hunter's form darkened, its many eyes dimming with what Marcus had learned to recognize as sadness. Through a series of complex patterns, it shared its story. It had been a scholar, studying other species, when it was captured by traders who didn't understand what they were seeing. They sold it to researchers who treated it like a dangerous animal, and its attempts to communicate were met with fear and violence. Marcus recorded everything, his heart heavy. You're not just intelligent, he signed. You're a scientist, like me. The creature's form brightened slightly, its version of a nod. Then it did something unexpected. Using its control over shadows, it created a three-dimensional model of its homeworld's solar system, showing Marcus things that human astronomy had never detected. Director Thompson, Marcus called over the comm. You need to see this. Thompson arrived just in time to see the Night Hunter demonstrating how its people used darkness itself to travel between stars. The creature wasn't just smart. It was part of a civilization far more advanced than humanity had imagined. Why didn't they come looking for you? Thompson asked after Marcus translated. The Night Hunter's response was complex. Its people were peaceful, preferring observation to confrontation. They had been watching, waiting for a species to prove itself worthy of contact by showing understanding rather than fear. So this whole time, Marcus said slowly, we weren't just studying you. You were studying us. The creature's shadows formed what Marcus now recognized as a smile. Then it shared one final revelation. It had chosen to stay in captivity, hoping to find a species capable of true understanding. In Marcus, it had finally found what it was looking for. As the day cycle ended, Marcus made a decision. Tomorrow, he signed to the Night Hunter, we begin sharing knowledge as equals. No more barriers. The creature's response was simple but profound. It created a pattern that Marcus had never seen before, the symbol for friend in its language, combined with the human handshake gesture they had practiced. In her office, Director Thompson reviewed Marcus's latest report. Her hand shook slightly as she signed the authorization to redesignate the project from dangerous species containment to first contact cultural exchange. The Night Hunter had been right to wait. Sometimes, the most important discoveries happen not in the light of scientific instruments, but in the shadows of understanding where fear gives way to friendship. A month into the cultural exchange program, Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor of what was once called the containment chamber. The night hunter moved around him, its shadowy form flowing like dark water. They had developed their own routine, mixing human and night hunter customs. Every individual needs a name, Marcus signed, his movements gentle in the dim light. Don't your people use names? The creature's response was complex, showing how night hunters identified each other through unique light patterns, like living constellations. But these patterns couldn't be spoken in human words. Would you mind if I called you Shadow? Marcus asked. Because of how you move, like living darkness. The night hunter considered this, its many eyes blinking in sequence. Then it created a new pattern, combining its personal light signature with the human word. It was accepting the name while keeping its original identity. Shadow was born. The other humans are still afraid, Marcus said, watching as Shadow arranged glowing crystals in a pattern that showed star maps. They don't understand why I trust you. Shadow paused its work. Using their shared sign language, it explained that fear was a natural response to the unknown. Even night hunters felt fear. They just expressed it differently. Then Shadow did something remarkable. It dimmed its light-absorbing field completely, revealing its true form for the first time. Marcus gasped. Shadow's body was like living art, covered in patterns that shifted and changed like the northern lights on Earth. Its multiple limbs weren't scary anymore. They were clearly tools for complex tasks, each one capable of incredible precision. You're beautiful, Marcus said out loud, forgetting to sign. Shadow understood anyway. It had been learning to read human facial expressions and body language. The creature moved closer, carefully extending one of its limbs toward Marcus's hand. They had never made direct contact before. Marcus stayed perfectly still as Shadow's appendage gently touched his palm. The sensation was strange, but not unpleasant, like touching cool silk that moved on its own. Through this contact, Shadow shared images directly into Marcus's mind. Its home world, its family, its life as a scholar. Dr. Reed. Director Thompson's sharp voice came through the speakers. Step away immediately. Marcus didn't move. It's okay, he called out. Shadow is showing me its memories. This is how its people share knowledge. Through their connection, Shadow showed Marcus how night hunters taught their young, how they explored the universe, and how they had watched humanity from afar, hoping humans would one day be ready for contact. The others will learn, Marcus signed after they broke contact, just like I did. But not everyone was convinced. Outside the chamber, security officers whispered about the risk. Some thought Marcus had been compromised. Others wanted Shadow moved to a more secure facility. Only Director Thompson's authority kept them at bay. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the memories Shadow had shared. He logged into the station's computer and began writing a new report titled Night Hunter Cultural Exchange, Breaking Down Barriers. As he wrote, Shadow was in its chamber, creating something of its own. Using the glowing plants and crystals, it built a perfect model of Earth's solar system, adding details even human satellites hadn't discovered yet. It was Shadow's way of saying, I trust you too. The next morning, when Marcus arrived, he found Director Thompson already there, staring at Shadow's model in amazement. You were right, she admitted to Marcus. We haven't been containing a dangerous creature. We've been hosting an ambassador. Marcus smiled as Shadow shifted its patterns to create a greeting. No, he corrected her. We've been making a friend. But even as they celebrated this new understanding, alarms began blaring in distant parts of the station. Their peaceful exchange was about to face its greatest test, and the bond between human and night hunter would soon be pushed to its limits. Red emergency lights flashed throughout Research Station Horizon as warning sirens blared. Marcus ran toward the control room, his heart pounding. The station's AI voice echoed through every corridor. Warning. Reactor core destabilizing. All personnel proceed to emergency stations. Inside the control room, chaos reigned. Engineers rushed between displays showing critical system failures. Director Thompson stood at the central console, her face pale in the flashing lights. "What happened?" Marcus demanded. "Meteoroid strike," Thompson answered, not looking up from the readings. "Hit us right in the reactor cooling system. We're losing containment." The main screen showed the reactor's core temperature rising rapidly. If it reached critical levels, the entire station would be destroyed, killing everyone aboard. "The automated repair systems can't reach the damage," one engineer reported. "It's in a section filled with radiation. No human could survive going in there." Marcus's eyes widened as an idea struck him. "But Shadow could," he said. "Night hunters can survive radiation. I've seen it in their biological data." Thompson shook her head. "Absolutely not. We can't release it during an emergency." "That it has a name," Marcus argued. "And Shadow is our only chance. The Night Hunters can manipulate energy itself, including radiation." Another alarm blared. "Reactor reaching critical levels," the AI announced. 15 minutes to core breach." Marcus stood straight, facing Thompson. "Director, we have two choices. Trust Shadow and maybe survive, or keep fearing the unknown and definitely die." Thompson looked at the countdown timer, then at the evacuation reports showing there weren't enough escape pods for everyone. "Even if I agreed, security protocols are locked during emergencies. We can't open the chamber." "Actually," Marcus said, pulling out his tablet, "we can. Shadow's been teaching me about Night Hunter technology. Their understanding of energy manipulation includes computer systems." His fingers flew across the screen, combining human and Night Hunter code. The security doors slid open. Thompson stared at him. "When did you learn to do that?" "About the same time you learned to trust me," Marcus replied, already running toward Shadow's chamber. He found Shadow already waiting, its form rippling with concern. Using their sign language, Marcus quickly explained the situation. Shadow's response was immediate, a pattern meaning help combined with friend. Security tried to stop them on their way to the reactor, but Thompson's override codes kept the doors opening. As they reached the radiation-filled section, Marcus had to stop. Shadow turned to him, its eyes forming patterns of reassurance. "Be careful," Marcus signed. Shadow's form rippled in what Marcus now recognized as laughter. Then it flowed into the reactor room like living darkness. Through the observation window, Marcus watched as Shadow's form began to glow with absorbed radiation. The creature was drawing the dangerous energy into itself, using its natural abilities to stabilize the reactor's core. "Radiation levels dropping," the AI announced. "Core temperature stabilizing." In the reactor room, Shadow's body pulsed with contained energy. The creature was visibly struggling, its form flickering as it absorbed more radiation than it had ever handled before. "You can do it," Marcus whispered, pressing his hand against the window. Shadow's eyes turned toward him, and its pattern changed. Instead of just absorbing the radiation, it began transforming it, turning deadly energy into beautiful patterns of light that danced through the reactor room. "Core temperature normal," the AI announced. "Radiation containment restored." When the emergency crews finally reached them, they found Marcus sitting beside the reactor room door, waiting. Inside, Shadow was slowly returning to its normal state, the last traces of transformed radiation creating a gentle light show around it. Director Thompson arrived with a medical team. She looked through the window at Shadow, then at Marcus. "I think," she said slowly, "we need to update our first contact protocols." Marcus smiled as Shadow flowed back toward them, its form creating the pattern for friendship that they had designed together. "Maybe," he suggested, "we should start by removing the word dangerous from Shadow's species classification." In response, Shadow created a new pattern, combining the symbols for trust and future. The Night Hunter had just proven that true strength lies not in being feared, but in being brave enough to help others despite their fear of you. The station's main conference room was packed with reporters from across the galaxy. 3 days had passed since the reactor incident, and news of Shadow's actions had spread far beyond research station horizon. Marcus sat at the front table beside Director Thompson, watching as Shadow demonstrated its abilities for the cameras. "As you can see," Thompson addressed the crowd, "the Night Hunters are not the dangerous predators we thought them to be. They are an advanced civilization with abilities we're only beginning to understand." The reporters watched in awe as Shadow created complex patterns of light and shadow in the air, showing how it had saved the station. The creature's movements were graceful and precise, every gesture calculated to ease the fears of those watching. One reporter, a tall being from a distant system, raised a hand. "We have footage from the reactor incident," they said, activating a holographic display. "Can you explain what we're seeing?" The recording showed Shadow absorbing the deadly radiation, but it also showed something the security cameras had caught. The moment when Shadow had used its own body to shield a maintenance worker who had been trapped in a nearby corridor. Marcus smiled. They had reviewed all the security footage after the crisis ended, and each new angle showed more examples of Shadow's careful protection of the station's crew. The creature hadn't just saved the reactor. It had actively worked to protect every life aboard. The Night Hunters have a saying. Marcus translated as Shadow created a pattern in the air. "Knowledge without compassion is as empty as light without shadow." The next few hours were filled with questions and demonstrations. Shadow showed how its people used their abilities for science and exploration, not hunting or fighting. Each demonstration broke down more barriers of fear and misunderstanding. Later that evening, in what was now called Shadow's chamber rather than a containment cell, Marcus reviewed the day's events with his friend. "They're finally seeing you as you really are," he signed. Shadow's response was thoughtful. It created a pattern showing how fear and understanding were like light and shadow. One could not exist without the other. Learning to overcome fear was part of growing as a species. "Dr. Reed," the station's AI interrupted. "We're receiving transmissions from 3 other research stations. They're reporting similar breakthroughs with their Night Hunter specimens." Marcus turned to Shadow in surprise. "There are others." Shadow's pattern shifted to show a map of research stations across the galaxy. In each one, a Night Hunter had been waiting, watching, hoping to find someone who would understand rather than fear. Marcus and Shadow's success had given them the courage to reveal their true nature. Director Thompson entered the chamber, her face bright with excitement. "The Galactic Science Council just called," she announced. "They want to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Night Hunters. They're asking for our help." Shadow created a new pattern, one that combined symbols of both human and Night Hunter origin. It was a proposal for a joint research project, humans and Night Hunters working together to explore the universe. "Look at this," Marcus said, checking his tablet. Messages were pouring in from scientists across the galaxy. Shadow's actions had done more than save the station. They had opened up new possibilities for interspecies cooperation. The security team, once so wary of Shadow, now greeted the creature with respect. They had reviewed the reactor incident footage frame by frame, seeing how Shadow had protected them even while struggling with the radiation. "You know what this means," Marcus signed to Shadow. "No more containment chambers. No more fear. You're free to go home." Shadow's response surprised him. Its pattern showed that home wasn't just a place. It was where understanding and friendship could be found. The creature had found both here with Marcus. As night fell on the station, Marcus watched Shadow create a stunning display of light and shadow that told the story of their friendship. Each pattern spoke of fear overcome, trust earned, and barriers broken. "Tomorrow," he said, "we start writing a new chapter, together." Shadow's answering pattern was simple but profound. The symbols for human and Night Hunter intertwined, surrounded by the shape of an endless galaxy waiting to be explored. 6 months after the reactor incident, Marcus stood on the observation deck of a Night Hunter ship, watching as stars streaked past in patterns he once thought impossible. Shadow moved beside him, its form flowing smoothly in the familiar darkness of its people's vessel. "I still can't believe how far we've come," Marcus said, both speaking and signing. He had gotten better at night hunter communication, just as Shadow had improved its understanding of human speech. They were heading to the night hunter homeworld, where Marcus would become the first human ambassador to their species. The ship's walls pulsed with living light, showing star maps and navigation data in ways that merged art and science. "Remember when they thought you were just a dangerous animal?" Marcus asked, watching Shadow create a teaching display for the human crew members aboard. Shadow's response was a complex pattern that translated roughly to: "Fear is the shadow cast by ignorance. Understanding is the light that makes it fade." The ship's communication system activated, showing a message from Earth. Director Thompson's face appeared on a screen made of controlled darkness. "Marcus, Shadow," she greeted them. "The integration program is exceeding all expectations. The night hunters at other research stations have all been reclassified as diplomatic guests. Their knowledge is revolutionizing our understanding of space travel." Shadow created a pattern showing how night hunters had always hoped for this outcome. Their species had watched humanity for centuries, seeing potential for either great understanding or great fear. They had waited patiently for humans to prove themselves ready for contact. "The Galactic Science Council sent their latest report," Thompson continued. "The night hunters' energy manipulation techniques are already helping us develop safer power sources, and their shadow drive technology might revolutionize space travel." Marcus smiled as Shadow demonstrated this technology, turning part of the observation deck into a miniature model of how their ships moved through space. The creature had become not just an ambassador but a teacher, helping humans understand the universe in new ways. "We're approaching the homeworld," the ship's AI announced. Through the viewport, Marcus saw it for the first time, a planet that seemed to dance with light and shadow. Cities made of living darkness stretched across continents, each one a testament to how beauty and technology could merge. "Your people built all this while we thought you were just predators," Marcus sighed, shaking his head in amazement. Shadow's response was gentle. It created a pattern showing how every species had to overcome its fears to grow. Humans had done it faster than most, once they opened their minds to understanding. As their ship descended toward the surface, Marcus saw other night hunters gathering to meet them. Each one had its own unique pattern, like living constellations moving in perfect harmony. Among them were the others who had been in research stations, now reunited with their people but choosing to continue working with humans. "Dr. Reed," the ship's AI interrupted. "Earth Command is requesting your first official report as ambassador." Marcus looked at Shadow, who had been his teacher as much as his student. "Tell them," he said, "that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our adaptability. It's our capacity to overcome our fears and recognize friendship, even in the darkness we once feared." Shadow added its own message, creating a pattern that the ship's computers translated for Earth. "In seeking to study us, you learned about yourselves. In trying to contain us, you freed yourselves from the prison of fear. Together, we will explore not just space, but the endless possibilities of understanding." The ship landed smoothly on the Night Hunter world. As Marcus prepared to step onto this new world, Shadow created one final pattern, the same one it had made when they first truly communicated, the symbol for friend. Marcus replied with the gesture they had created together. Human hand movements merged with Shadow's patterns. It meant different forms, same heart. Around them, the combined crews of humans and night hunters prepared to begin a new chapter in galactic history. They had proven that the greatest discoveries happen not when we conquer our fears, but when we embrace the unknown with an open mind and a willing heart.